Gone are the days where the only distractions we had to worry about at work were phone calls and getting trapped in the kitchen by the office gossip. Now, the age-old art of procrastination and time wasting is made worse by the constant ping of your inbox, the Twitter feed on your phone, LinkedIn requests, and the pile of dirty washing sitting potentially in the corner of your home office. Well, according to research, the average employee admits to wasting 2 hours a day on non-work tasks. And with all these new distractions, it's no wonder. So joining us today to help us get through our to-do list and focus our attention is Director of the Institute of Executive Coaching and Leadership, McFarlane, and the productivity ninja himself, Matt Cowdroy, both in the studio with us. Thanks for joining us on the show today, guys.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So there is really no place for procrastination, obviously, in the modern working environment. So why do we do it? Might start with you.
I would say procrastination is often caused from a fear of success. Sometimes we're scared. Our little lizard brain is saying, let's not stand out too much.
It's not a boredom thing?
Oh, it could be boredom. It could be boredom, absolutely.
Actually, if you look at the work of Evian Gordon and the teams over at Westmead Hospital, they do a lot of neuroscience research, and they point to the fact that the human system has a preference for pleasure over pain, and also is wired to move to the path of least resistance. So if it's easier to do this, it's like impulse buying. When you buy the lollies at the counter just before you're heading out of a store, it's an impulse to move towards something that is more pleasurable.
Do you think technology's made us less or more productive then when you look at it?
I think that technology is actually making us a little bit less productive. There's a lot of inputs that people are gaining at one time, and it's creating more distraction. So that's pulling them away from being able to focus on stuff.
It's interesting, Matt, because obviously, you know, you have email now. Back in the day, obviously, there was no email, and you'd think that would make you more productive, but then you've also got the Facebook, the LinkedIn, the Instagram, things that are easily very distracting.
Yeah, and these things, if we have them all turned on with notifications,
I think most people do.
Things coming in all the time, it's really hard to find time just to focus on a task, and that's one of the biggest challenges. Like, to get something finished, we have to be able to focus, and we just keep getting distracted.
Well, let's talk about how you do that. I mean, how do you beat procrastination? Are there some tips you have for us?
Yeah, I mean, beating procrastination, one of the best ways to start is to just break down whatever you're doing into little chunks, and so you're not too scared by the daunting task at hand. I mean, that's probably, and I like to call those micro goals.
Right.
Yeah. So breaking it down.
Do you do the most unpleasant things first, or do you do the things that you'd prefer to sort of get them out of the way first?
I come through a slightly different door. You're going to have to build a muscle that is really important to be able to focus on whatever it is that you're doing in the moment. So mindfulness, and Matt knows he does yoga and a variety of other things that are practices that help you to be more mindful so that you can focus on what you're doing. Otherwise, the pings, dings, rings, and bings, they're all taking our attention to a lot of other places.
So be mindful and present in the task you're actually doing.
Yes.
Matt, I guess, you know, I was just saying before, often I'll leave the things I don't want to do, obviously, last on my list and get the things that are easy done first. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things we say to ourselves which causes procrastination is, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to do this. And I like to turn that around and just ask myself the question, what if I did know? What if I did know how to do this? Or what if I did know how to finish this task? And you just find that you just start. And getting started is probably one of the key things.
Now, you talk about the Pomodoro Technique.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, the Pomodoro Technique was developed by Francesco Cirillo in the 1980s.
Okay.
Now, it's traditionally a tomato-shaped timer, because he was using a tomato timer. I use a penguin. So this is actually a timer, and the Pomodoro Technique is based on setting the timer for 25 minutes, and while that timer's going, you give yourself total focus. When you focus on the task for 25 minutes, and then you have a short break, normally a 5-minute break. So the Pomodoro Technique, you can even download an app on your smartphone which will do the countdown for you. And the whole idea is total focus for 25 minutes.
Well, I was going to say, is it a good idea, Chip, to give yourself a break? I mean, if you have something, or reward yourself, give yourself something to look forward to at the end of completing a task?
Yes, it's really important, because if it's just continuous, the brain is going to shut down after a while anyway. It needs its own rest. So by giving yourself those micro doses of fun, of pleasure, then it allows you to be able to get into things. So the 25 minutes are easier to focus on if you give yourself those little bits of breaks.
So, I mean, in terms of when you're working on a hard task to a deadline and you need to get something done, that's obviously a time when sometimes people can procrastinate because it's just hard work for a long period of time. Is that sort of detrimental to success, do you think?
In terms of focusing for just the 25
getting
minutes?
that done. Or no, for the whole time. If you've got a long task and you have a deadline to get to, is that just detrimental? Like, are you bound to procrastinate in that time?
You are, and it's very hard to focus for an extended period of time. I mean, we talk about technology distracting us, but the other thing that really distracts us, if we're trying to focus for, say, 6 hours non-stop, we just distract ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, the brain wanders, so it's very hard to maintain that focus.
Now, what about people who work from home? Because it's becoming more and more sort of common in the workplace to work from a home office.
Yes.
You've got a lot of distractions at home, things you need to get done, errands to run.
Yes.
How do you stop yourself from getting distracted there?
That's not the easiest thing. One of the things that's important for someone who runs a home office is to establish disciplines in terms of what I will spend my time on in this moment, what I'll tend to spend my time on in this moment, and really establish those. You don't have to do the 9 to 5, but specific spaces of time, sort of like the Pomodoro Technique, where specific spaces of time that are going to be dedicated to an activity, and then really getting into it. And once again, the breaks in between.
Do you think it is easy to procrastinate at home? I mean, would you even suggest people not to work from home, or is that unrealistic?
I think that's unrealistic, and I think working from home has a huge benefit because you really can control your own destiny and control your own space and time. And I would just add to what Chip was saying, that you need spaces of time, but you also really need a physical space. So if you can create a physical space where that's where you do your work, that will help a lot as well.
Let's talk about other distractions like emails, social media and phone calls. They're obviously essential tools for, life and business, but how do you stop them from actually interrupting your workflow, Chip?
Ooh, that's an easy one. There's actually, from all the inputs that we're getting, what we're finding is that there are now apps and tools to do just the opposite. You have an app called Freedom, and you can get on Mac or on Android in a variety of different ways, and it actually up to 8 hours cuts off your access to online material.
Hang on, can you expand on that? Up to 8 hours, what do you mean by that?
So you can set it for 1 hour where it stops all input from Facebook and all the other things. And once you commit your computer to it, it actually holds it off for that period of time.
So people who need to be physically restrained from Facebook need to do that?
Yes, it's an easy entry point.
Are there other ones that you know of as well?
More of the other ones I've noticed are just getting you to do fewer things, but that's the one that actually cuts off the inputs themselves.
Right, okay.
For me, I like turning off the Wi-Fi on the computer. That's really a big step because then the computer's at least attached. Or if you haven't got the self-confidence for that, literally reach over and turn off the modem. I mean, if you're in your home office, you can often do that as well.
People these days really need to be restrained. I'm surprised employers aren't doing that.
But you have to. But when you are disconnected, you have a very different sense in your body and your mind that you know that it's turned off.
Maybe leaving it disconnected for a certain time period every day would be a good plan. Now, meetings, they can obviously often be time wasters. And when you sit on those meetings and there's one employee that asks a lot of questions and you're just thinking, when is this meeting going to be over? How do you sort of keep that to a minimum?
It's interesting because in organizations, we have meetings for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes we have it just to be able to get everyone together so that there's a human interaction in the midst of a project. Sometimes it's to get content across. So for the person who's leading the meeting, having purposefulness behind it and actually holding to times is difficult, but one of the most important disciplines for having a meeting.
Is there a certain time period, do you think, that a meeting should be held in?
I think we traditionally book meetings in half-hour and 1 hour blocks because that's what our email system does or our Outlook does. So I recommend people book meetings for either 20 minutes or 50 minutes just to create a different mindset. Because if you book it for an hour, people sort of think it will run over time. So that's what I recommend.
What if it does go over time?
Well, you really have to agree as a group as to whether it's important to stay or not. I mean, the way I love to start a meeting, and I recommend people start meetings, is to agree on an outcome. So just to say as a group, what's the outcome for the meeting, and to write it down on a whiteboard or a flip chart or even a piece of paper and put it on the table.
And stick to that specific outcome.
Stick to that outcome.
The outcome and the process is also within it to be able to hold it together so that we know that we're going to be covering this. We won't get sidelined too far on that. So in the group, typically you'll need someone to actually be the guardian of time.
Hopefully the one holding the meeting so it can actually be stuck to.
Preferably.
Now, how do you deal with sort of interruptions from colleagues? You obviously have colleagues that might ask you a lot of questions. I mean, not necessarily non-work related. It might be work related, but how do you deal with that, Chip?
A lot of times what we suggest that executives or business people do is set up a time with the people around them to actually explain what they're in the midst of doing. I'm going to be taking a break now. I'm open to, my door's open at any time. If it's open all the time, unfortunately, you get so many distractions that you never get on and doing what needs to be done. So beginning to outline to people, when are the times that I'm going to be open? When are the times that I really do need to focus on this? And establishing a discipline around that.
Because Matt, you want to be friendly as well. You don't want to come across as the rude sort of co-worker.
You definitely want to be friendly. One of the productivity ninja characteristics, if you like, is ruthlessness. And ruthlessness is having the strength to say no, but you do have to do it in a very approachable way. And one thing I like to recommend for people is to say, if you're in the middle of something, I'll come back to you in 2 hours, or I'll come back to you in 3 hours. Because if it's important, people will say, great, come back to me. But if they're there just for a chat, they'll normally say, oh, don't worry.
What if you want to say no to a task and it's your boss, or it's a tough person to say no to? How do you do that in a good way?
To me, that's about coming back to your priorities. And if you've got really clear priorities, which I do recommend writing on a piece of paper or a post-it note so you know what they are. If that task is not in alignment with your priorities, you can say no on that ground if you like, or if it needs to replace one of the priorities, that's a discussion you can have.
Just quickly, is there a specific way to organise your diary, just in 30 seconds or less, each of you chip, so that you can maximise your time in the day?
Get an understanding of what is your job and then what needs to happen in order to accomplish that, and just break that down, as you mentioned before, into the smaller bits to get it done. Just what's the job?
Sounds perfect. Matt?
And I would say to organise your diary, organise your diary. Basically sit down and do it, because so many people don't give it the time.
All right, Matt Cowdroy, Chip McFarlane, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure.